What if I told you there are berry varieties sitting in abandoned farmsteads across America right now, 80, 90, 100 years old, still producing more fruit per bush than anything you can buy at a modern nursery? No spraying, no fertilizing, no irrigation, no human attention of any kind for decades. Just ancient root systems sunk 8 feet deep into ground they have owned since before your grandparents were born. These bushes survived the Dust Bowl. They survived the Great Depression. They survived 2 world wars, 3 generations of neglect, and every drought, freeze, and disease that killed the modern cultivars planted beside them, and they are still fruiting, heavily, reliably, every single year. Meanwhile, the patented berry cultivar you bought from the nursery last spring for $28 will be dead in 12 years, maybe 15 if you baby it. It was designed that way, bred for shelf life, not your life, bred for the truck, not the table, bred to look perfect in a plastic clamshell under fluorescent supermarket lights, not to feed your family for a century. The global berry market generates $23 billion annually. The nursery industry generates $50 billion. Every dollar depends on you buying new plants every decade because the old ones died on schedule. Then I found the bushes they stopped selling, the ones that refused to die, the ones producing 30 to 50 pounds per plant, while patented varieties struggle to hit 15. And the reason nurseries pulled them from catalogs will make you rethink every plant you have ever purchased. Welcome back to Nature's Lost Vault. Before we open this vault, if these stories matter to you, the best way to preserve this knowledge is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share these vaults with those who need to remember what we forgot. In the fall of 2014, a woman named Margaret Townsend bought a foreclosed property outside of Traverse City, Michigan. The house was gutted. The barn had collapsed. The land had not been farmed in 40 years. The realtor called it a teardown. Margaret was not looking at the house. She was looking at the back fence line. Behind the ruined barn, buried under wild grape and Virginia creeper, she found a row of berry bushes, 12 of them, massive, gnarled trunks thicker than her wrist, branches arching 6 feet in every direction. She could not identify them at first because the canes were so old they had developed bark like small trees. She cut back the overgrowth. She cleared the weeds. She did nothing else. No fertilizer, no pruning beyond access, no irrigation. The following July, those 12 bushes produced over 400 pounds of berries, dark purple, intensely sweet. Flavor so concentrated that Margaret said it made supermarket berries taste like wet cardboard. She brought a sample to a pomologist at Michigan State University. He examined the plants. He tested the fruit. He ran sugar content analysis that showed Brix levels 30% higher than commercial varieties. He checked the growth patterns against historical cultivar databases. The bushes were Eldorado blackberries, introduced in 1883, over 130 years old, and they were outproducing every modern patented blackberry cultivar in the Michigan State trial plots by a factor of 2 to 1. Read that again. 130-year-old plants. Zero maintenance for 4 decades. No spray, no fertilizer, no irrigation. No human hand touching them since the Reagan administration, outproducing modern cultivars that receive professional care, irrigation, fertilization, and pesticide applications on a university research farm. The pomologist shook his head. He was not surprised. He was embarrassed, because he knew exactly why those cultivars were no longer sold, and the reason had nothing to do with performance. It had nothing to do with flavor. It had nothing to do with disease resistance, or yield, or adaptability. It had everything to do with money. Always money. Let me show you what happened, because this story is not about one woman and 12 bushes. It is about the systematic removal of the most productive, most resilient, most independent berry varieties from the American nursery system over the past 50 years. And the reason connects to every script this channel has ever produced. Before 1930, berry selection in America was done by farmers, not corporations, not universities. Farmers, they selected for one thing above all others: survival. A farmer in 1890 did not care if a berry shipped well to Chicago. He did not care if it looked uniform in a wooden crate. He did not care if it ripened all at once for mechanical harvest. He cared whether it survived winter, whether it produced reliably, whether it fed his family year after year after year without requiring inputs he could not afford. The varieties that emerged from this 300-year selection process were extraordinary, not because they were genetically engineered, because they were tested by reality. Every harsh winter killed the weak plants. Every drought eliminated the Cellurutit. Every disease removed the susceptible. What remained after a century of this natural pressure testing was a population of berry plants so tough, so deeply rooted, so fundamentally adapted to their specific landscape that nothing could kill them. El Dorado blackberry, introduced 1883, still producing at documented sites 130 years later. Canes survived temperatures to -25 Fahrenheit without protection. Fruit production documented at 30 to 50 pounds per mature plant. Disease resistance so robust that no spray program was ever developed for it because none was needed. Latham raspberry, released by the University of Minnesota in 1920. Within a decade, it became the most widely planted raspberry in North America. The reason was simple: it would not die. Latham survived Zone 3 winters without damage. It tolerated clay soil, sandy soil, wet soil, dry soil. It produced 5 to 8 pounds per plant annually with zero maintenance. Plants documented in Minnesota at 60 to 70 years of age, still fruiting heavily. One report from a North Dakota homestead documented a Latham planting from the 1930s, still producing in 2005. 75 years, no replanting, no replacement, no purchase. Concord grape, developed by Ephraim Wales Bull in 1849, he planted 22,000 seedlings and selected one. Downing gooseberry, introduced in the 1850s, survived mildew that killed every European variety. Produced for decades without attention. Bushes, documented at 50 years of age, still bearing heavy crops. These were not specialty varieties for collectors. These were the backbone of American home fruit production for over a century. Every farmstead had them. Every grandmother knew them. Every family depended on them. Then something changed, and it changed for exactly the reason you think it did. In 1930, the Plant Patent Act was signed into law. For the first time in American history, someone could own a living organism. A plant breeder could develop a new variety, patent it, and collect royalties every time a nursery sold it. The law was lobbied for by the nursery industry, specifically by large commercial nurseries and rose breeders who argued that without patent protection, there was no financial incentive to develop new varieties. The argument sounded reasonable. It was also the beginning of the end for every heritage variety that could not generate royalty income. Let that sink in. Before 1930, no one owned a blueberry. No one owned a raspberry. No one owned the right to propagate a plant that nature created. After 1930, corporations could own. Once corporations could own plants, every plant that could not be owned became a competitor to be eliminated, not by law, by catalog, by exclusion, by the quiet removal of free alternatives from the marketplace. The effect was not immediate, but it was inevitable. Plant breeding shifted. The goal was no longer creating varieties that lasted forever. The goal was creating varieties that could be patented and sold. And here is the critical insight that the nursery industry will never admit publicly. A plant that lasts 100 years is a terrible product. Think about it from a business perspective. If you sell someone a blackberry bush that produces for a century, you have made one sale. One in 100 years. Your grandchildren will still be waiting for the repeat purchase. But if you sell someone a blackberry bush that declines after 10 to 15 years, that same customer buys again and again and again, 7 to 10 purchases per century instead of one. The nursery industry does not sell plants. It sells planned obsolescence wrapped in root balls. This is not speculation. The data proves it. Modern patented berry cultivars have measurably shorter productive lifespans than their heritage predecessors. A study from Oregon State University tracked commercial blueberry plantings across the Pacific Northwest. Modern patented varieties like Duke, Draper, and Liberty showed significant yield decline beginning at year 12 to 15. By year 20, many plantings were being removed and replaced. The university's own recommendation was to plan for replanting every 15 to 20 years. Heritage varieties, like Jersey, introduced in 1928, and Rubel, selected from the wild in 1912, are documented producing at 50 years of age and beyond. Commercial blueberry plantings in New Jersey, established in the 1920s, using these varieties were still in production in the 1980s. 60 years from the same plants. But Jersey and Rubel are not patented. No one collects a royalty when a nursery sells them. No breeding program receives funding from their propagation. No corporation benefits from their existence. So they disappeared from catalogs. Not because they stopped working, because they stopped generating revenue for the people who control what you can buy. Search the top 10 online nurseries in America right now. Count how many heritage berry varieties they offer versus patented cultivars. The ratio will make you angry. It should make you angry, because what you are seeing is not a product catalog. It is evidence of a deliberate replacement strategy executed over decades. Stark Brothers, the oldest nursery in America, founded in 1816, now sells almost exclusively patented cultivars. Their blackberry selection is dominated by varieties with trademark, symbols, and patent numbers. The Eldorado blackberry that produced for Margaret Townsend for 130 years is not listed. Gurney's, Spring Hill, Nature Hills. The same pattern, patented cultivars with 15-year lifespans fill the catalogs. Heritage varieties that would outlive your mortgage are nowhere to be found. The nursery industry will tell you modern cultivars are superior, better flavor, better disease resistance, better yields. This is a lie, and the evidence against it is growing in abandoned farmsteads across every state in America. Dr. Marvin Pritz at Cornell University spent decades studying berry production systems. His research consistently showed that heritage varieties adapted to local conditions outperformed modern cultivars over 20-year timescales. The modern varieties won the first 5 years. They produced slightly larger berries. They looked more uniform. They tested well in short-duration trials. But after year 10, the lines crossed. Heritage varieties continued producing. Modern varieties declined. After year 20, there was no comparison. The heritage plants were still going strong. The modern plants were dying or dead. The studies that nurseries cite to prove modern superiority are 3 to 5 year trials. Of course, a new cultivar looks good in year 3. Everything looks good in year 3. A Ponzi scheme looks good in year 3. Show me year 30. Show me year 50. Show me the 100-year data. That is where the truth lives. And that is exactly the data the industry will never fund. Because funding a 50-year study on heritage berry production would be funding the evidence of their own obsolescence. The breeding programs themselves reveal the priorities. Look at what modern berry breeders optimize for. Firmness for shipping, uniform size for packaging, simultaneous ripening for mechanical harvest, shelf life of 14 days minimum. Visual appearance under fluorescent lighting. Notice what is missing from that list. Flavor, nutritional density, root depth, cold hardiness, drought tolerance, disease resistance over decades, productive lifespan. Every trait that matters to you, the person eating the berry, is absent from the breeding objectives. Every trait that matters to the supply chain. The system moving the berry 3,000 miles from field to supermarket dominates the program. You are not the customer. You are the end user. The customer is Driscoll's. The customer is Walmart. The customer is the logistics company that needs fruit to survive a cross-country truck ride without bruising. The berry was bred for them. You just pay for it. Here is what else they removed when they pulled heritage varieties from the catalogs. Flavor, real flavor. The kind that makes you close your eyes when you bite into a berry. Modern berries are bred for shipping. The fruit must survive 3,000 miles in a refrigerated truck and still look presentable in a supermarket. This requires firm flesh, thick skin, and uniform ripening. Every one of those traits reduces flavor. Firm flesh means less juice. Thick skin means more resistance and less sweetness reaching your tongue. Uniform ripening means harvesting before peak sugar development. Heritage berries were bred for eating, directly from the bush into your mouth, while the sun warms the fruit and the juice runs down your chin and your children reach for more before you have finished picking. They are softer, they are juicier, they are sweeter. They carry a complexity of flavor that supermarket berries cannot approach because the genetics for shipping and the genetics for flavor are in direct opposition. A heritage raspberry tastes like perfume and honey and something wild that has no name. A supermarket raspberry tastes like water trapped in red wax. You cannot have both. The industry chose shipping. They chose the truck over your tongue. They chose the profit margin over the flavor. And then they stopped selling you the varieties that would have let you taste the difference. A 2019 sensory analysis study at the University of Florida blind-tested consumers on heritage. Versus modern strawberry cultivars, the heritage varieties scored significantly higher on sweetness, flavor complexity, and overall preference. The modern cultivars scored higher on appearance and firmness. The consumers wanted flavor. The industry delivered appearance. Because appearance sells in a supermarket, flavor sells in a garden, and the industry does not profit from your garden. Now here is where I need to be honest with you, because that is what this channel does. Heritage varieties are not perfect. They have real limitations that romanticized internet posts will not mention. Many heritage berries are softer and more perishable. If you want to sell at a farmer's market 30 miles away, some heritage varieties will not survive the drive in presentable condition. This is a real constraint for commercial growers. Some heritage varieties are less resistant to specific modern diseases that did not exist when they were developed. Spotted wing Drosophila, an invasive pest that arrived in the United States in 2008, affects heritage varieties that had no evolutionary exposure to it. This is not a failure of the variety. It is a new challenge that requires management. Yield per berry is often smaller in heritage varieties. You pick more berries to fill the same bucket. If your time has a dollar value, this matters. The total weight per plant may be higher, but the individual berries are often smaller and require more labor to harvest. I am telling you this because understanding the real trade-offs makes you a better grower. Heritage varieties are superior for home production, self-sufficiency, and long-term food security. They are not always superior for commercial farming operations optimized for supermarket supply chains. The distinction matters, and collapsing it into simple hero versus villain narrative serves nobody. The honest truth is this: for your backyard, your homestead, your family's long-term food independence, heritage varieties are overwhelmingly the better choice. They last longer, they taste better, they require less input, they save you money across decades, and they cannot be taken away from you by a corporation deciding to discontinue a product line. Now here is how to find what the nurseries stopped selling. Heritage berry varieties still exist. They survive in old farmsteads in USDA germplasm repositories. In the collections of obsessive amateur growers who never stopped propagating what their grandparents planted, finding them requires effort. The system was not designed to help you. The USDA National Clonal Germplasm Repository in Corvallis, Oregon maintains living collections of heritage berry genetics. They preserve varieties that the commercial nursery industry abandoned decades ago. The collection exists for research purposes, but it proves that genetics survive. Specialty heritage nurseries still sell these varieties: Fedco Trees in Maine, Raintree Nursery in Washington, St. Lawrence Nurseries in New York before they closed, One Green World in Oregon. These operations carry heritage varieties that Stark Brothers dropped 30 years ago. They sell Latham raspberry. They sell heritage gooseberries and currants. They sell rootstock that your great-grandmother would recognize. Seed saver exchanges and scion swaps happen across the country. The North American Fruit Explorers Network connects growers who trade heritage plant material. Local permaculture groups often maintain propagation networks specifically for heritage fruit varieties that nurseries no longer carry. And then there is the most direct approach. Find the old bushes. Drive the back roads of your county. Look for abandoned homesteads, foreclosed farms, old house foundations where the house is gone but the landscaping survived. Berry bushes outlive houses. They outlive barns. They outlive the families that planted them. They outlive the towns those families built. A blackberry planted in 1920 is still there in 2026 still, fruiting, still producing food for raccoons and birds, and anyone who stops the car and walks 50 feet into the overgrowth to find what the nursery catalogs pretend does not exist. When you find them, take cuttings. This is the part that terrifies the nursery industry, because propagating heritage berries is so absurdly easy that a child can do it. And once you learn, you never buy another berry bush again. Ever. Blackberries and raspberries propagate from root cuttings and tip layering with almost zero failure rate. Dig a piece of root the thickness of a pencil. Plant it horizontally 2 inches deep. It grows. That is it. No grafting. No special equipment. No nursery license required. No royalty owed to anyone. You can turn one bush into 50 in a single season, for free. This is why patented varieties come with legal restrictions against propagation. Not because propagation is difficult, because it is too easy. Because if people realized how easy it is, the entire repeat purchase model collapses overnight. Gooseberries and currants propagate from hardwood cuttings taken in late fall. Cut an 8-inch section of dormant cane, stick it in moist soil. It roots by spring. One bush becomes 20 in a single season. Grapes propagate from dormant cane cuttings with similar ease. 3-node sections planted in early spring root reliably in most soils. Every heritage bush you find is a genetic library. Every cutting you take is a book saved from a burning building. Every plant you root is a vote against the system that tried to replace permanence with planned obsolescence. Here is the math that destroys the nursery industry's business model. One heritage blackberry bush costs $8 to $15 from a specialty nursery. It produces 50 to 100 years. At 30 pounds per year average production, that single bush yields 1,500 to 3,000 pounds of fruit over its lifetime. At supermarket prices of $4 per pound, that is $6,000 to $12,000 of fruit from a single $12 investment. Zero ongoing cost, zero replanting, zero repurchasing. One patented blackberry bush costs $18 to $28 from a mainstream nursery. It produces for 10 to 15 years. At 15 pounds per year, that bush yields 150 to 225 pounds over its productive life. At the same dollar for per pound, that is $600 to $900 of fruit. Then it dies. Then you buy again. To match the heritage bush's lifetime production, you would need to purchase 7 to 10 patented replacements. At $28 each, that is $196 to $280 in plant purchases versus $12 once. The heritage variety delivers 10 to 20 times more fruit at 1/10 the cost. The nursery industry is not selling you superior genetics. It is selling you an installment plan disguised as a plant, and this extends beyond berries. The same pattern holds for fruit trees, nut trees, and ornamental plantings. Patented varieties with shorter lifespans replace heritage varieties that would outlive the mortgage. But the most outrageous case is not a berry that was abandoned. It is a berry that was banned. In 1911, the United States federal government made it illegal to grow currants and gooseberries. The justification was white pine blister rust, a fungal disease that used ribby species as an alternate host. The timber industry lobbied hard. White pine was worth billions. Currants and gooseberries were worth nothing to corporations. The ban passed for 55 years. It was a federal crime to grow one of the most nutritious berries on earth. Black currants contain 4 times the vitamin C of oranges. 4 times. They contain anthocyanins at concentrations that make blueberries look pale. They were a dietary staple across Europe and were rapidly becoming one in America when the ban hit. The federal ban was lifted in 1966, but individual states maintained their own prohibitions. New York did not legalize currant growing until 2003. Some states still restrict it. An entire generation of Americans grew up not knowing what a currant tastes like. European children eat them by the handful. American children have never seen one. The ban destroyed the American currant industry. Before 1911, currants were one of the most widely grown small fruits in the northern United States. After the ban, the nurseries that sold them closed. The varieties were lost. The knowledge disappeared. By the time the ban lifted, nobody remembered how to grow them, where to buy them, or why they mattered. 900 varieties of currants and gooseberries existed in American nursery catalogs before 1911. Today, you can find maybe 30. The rest are gone. Extinct in commerce. Some extinct entirely. Wiped out not by nature, but by legislation purchased by the timber industry to protect pine trees worth less per acre than the currant bushes they replaced. The entire ornamental nursery industry depends on landscape plants that need replacement every 15 to 20 years. A heritage lilac lives 200 years. A patented cultivar gives you 25 if you are lucky. But the patented cultivar has a trademark and a marketing budget and a spot in the catalog. The heritage variety has a grandmother who remembers its name. There are 2 economies at work here: the visible economy of nursery catalogs, patent royalties, and repeat purchases, and the invisible economy of heritage plants, shared cuttings, and permanent food infrastructure that operates entirely outside corporate control. The visible economy generates $50 billion per year. The invisible economy generates 0 revenue, but it feeds people. It has fed people for centuries, and it will continue feeding people long after the last patented cultivar expires and the corporation that owned it has filed for bankruptcy. Margaret Townsend's 12 Eldorado blackberry bushes are still producing. Every July, without fail, without input, without permission from any corporation or patent holder. She has taken cuttings and shared them with 30 families in Traverse City. Those families have taken their own cuttings. The genetics are spreading. The 130-year-old variety is reproducing itself through a network that no nursery controls, no corporation profits from, and no patent restricts. This is how heritage plants survive. Not through catalogs, through communities, through grandmothers who wrap cuttings in wet newspaper and hand them over the fence, through neighbors who dig up raspberry suckers and carry them across the street in a coffee can, through the stubborn human instinct to share what grows freely with people who need it. The nursery industry cannot compete with free. They cannot patent a cutting taken from a bush your grandmother planted. They cannot charge royalties on genetics that entered the public domain before your parents were born. They cannot stop you from propagating a plant that belongs to no one and everyone simultaneously. So they did the only thing they could. They stopped selling heritage varieties. They filled catalogs with patented replacements. They funded university breeding programs that produced cultivars with built-in expiration dates. They convinced an entire generation that newer meant better, that patented meant superior, that the old varieties were outdated, disease-prone, and inferior. They lied. The 130-year-old bushes behind Margaret Townsend's collapsed barn are the proof still producing, still fruiting, still feeding anyone willing to look past the catalog and into the fence line where the real genetics survive. Your great-grandmother did not buy berries at the supermarket. She walked to the back fence. She picked until the bucket was full. She canned what she could not eat. She shared what she could not can. And the bushes she picked from are still alive, still fruiting, still waiting in overgrown fence rows and forgotten homesteads across this country. The nursery industry prayed you would never find them. The patent holders hoped you would keep buying replacements every decade. The breeders needed you to believe that 15 years was a normal lifespan for a berry bush. The bush does not care about patents. It does not understand planned obsolescence. It does not read nursery catalogs or respond to marketing campaigns or require annual subscription fees to keep producing. It just keeps sending roots deeper. It just keeps pushing new canes. It just keeps producing fruit for anyone patient enough to let it do what a century of survival taught it to do. Find the old bushes, take the cuttings, plant the permanents, share with your neighbors. Let the nursery catalogs collect dust on the shelf where they belong. Your grandmother's berry patch was not a garden. It was an inheritance, a living trust that required no lawyer, no paperwork, no annual fee. It paid dividends every July in buckets of fruit that tasted like the sun, concentrated itself into something you could hold in your hand. It appreciated in value every year as the roots went deeper and the canes grew stronger. And it was designed to be passed down generation after generation without ever needing to be repurchased. That inheritance is still out there, still growing, still waiting for someone to remember what it is worth. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps preserve this wisdom. The next vault opens soon.